What's up, cats and kittens? It's your boy D Bird. Back again with DJB to talk about our favorite reality show. Hi, DJB.
Hello, D-Bird. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are
I
you
love
this
it.
evening?
Fantastic. A little leery of the cats and kittens intro, but if it worked for Carol Baskin, it might as well work for you.
Hey, you crazy cats and kittens. Look, I'm more of a dog guy, I'll admit. But I have met a couple cats who, when they didn't scratch me, were pretty cool.
And what about kittens?
Kittens, all suck.
Okay.
Tastes good
Fair.
with teriyaki, though.
Oh, don't say that.
And this is how we lose all of our fans right off the bat. All right. Well, we are on episode 11 of this season of Survivor. It's going so quickly. You know, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, lucky number 11. Just happy to be here. Happy to talk. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, on the last episode of Survivor, Gabe went away. R.I.P. Everyone comes back to camp and gives a big old hug of Kyle. While he was in on the vote, you know, he still was sad to see his boy go.
Yeah.
I feel like he has genuine, like, bro-ships with Gabe. TK was his boy. Like, all of these people, just the biggest douchebags. And this down-home guy with a huge heart is just like, oh, but they didn't know him like I knew him, you know?
Yeah, he's a home brother. I think he's a good dude who just genuinely gets along with people, and like, I think because he's laid back, even the dweebs that annoy you and I, he's able to just roll with and get to know him on a different level, and I think people respect that. Like, he just seems like a good dude.
Yeah, totally. Good dude. Well, don't prove us wrong, Kyle. Don't go me too and nobody now. Well, Sue also was left out on the vote, was blindsided, just says, I'm glad it wasn't me. But she's pissed. She can't even trust Caroline. And now she's like wanting to get Kyle even more now, which is so funny. Caroline, her number one, she's mad at for not including her. But instead of being like, oh, now, what do I have to do to get on top? She's just like, I'll get you, Kyle.
Well, Kyle had to have influenced Caroline, because there's no way that Caroline would do that without evil Kyle's. It's just, she has been on the same record. Like, it's just been on repeat since like episode 3 was. I have no idea how she's made it this far, other than like that useful idiot. Like, because Caroline's just like, hey, let's talk. And then in a matter of 30 seconds, completely convinces her that, yep, we're number 1 and 2 for each other now.
Yeah, 100%. It was so easy to do. I was like blown away. Because, Sue is pissed off. Caroline says it's important for us to talk. They go to the side. And, basically Caroline just says, here, we should still work together. And Sue was like, she extended an olive branch. All I needed was an olive branch. 1 and 2. We're good. Caroline also talks about how, growing up, she had ADHD. She was constantly failing. She would do stuff, get distracted, and feel like a failure. And so coming out here, her goal is to play a game she's proud of, which is why she had to cut Gabe's head off then versus like waiting until he gets more of the credit.
Yeah, which we talked about it last episode. I still think it was too soon for Gabe, but maybe I'll be proven wrong. Caroline seems way smarter than me.
Yeah, she does. She is a whiz.
Yeah.
So basically 5 of them are standing around like a water wheel. Sue, Rachel, Teeny, Caroline, and Andy. Rachel just looks around and is like, I feel good about the 5 of us here, because 5 is the majority now. and they're kind of like, yeah, it's our decision, like who goes home next. We run the game. And Genevieve throws a name out to Sue, says she's targeting Kyle. It's what I thought was funny about this scene was like Rachel, my girl, just looks at random people standing around and is like, us right here, right? You know what I mean?
And then everybody's like, yeah, let's
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah, it should be us, right?
We're the underdogs, hands in, Captain Planet. Like, I was like, what just happened?
It's almost like you just find yourself standing in a group and you kind of like us, right? And then you give it a name, maybe that's the move, is just like the fucking, Scrappy Doos. And then everyone's like, yeah, Scrappy Doo. And you just happen to be standing around a water wheel at the same time.
But it was weird because it was like the perfect cast of misfits, right? It's like you have Sam, who's been like pinpointed as Ken, like Barbie and Ken, and then you have Kyle, who's won everything, and then you have Genevieve, who's the mastermind, and those are the three that are on the outs, and then these other five are just here cooling out. It's like, oh, this does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, realistically, yes. And meanwhile, Kyle, Sam, and Genevieve are talking together, and they're saying like, we're the biggest threats. We have to figure out how to still survive in this game. We only have each other. And, basically Genevieve has a breakthrough. She's like, yeah, ever since I cut Keyshawn's head off and he says, Genevieve, I trusted you, I realized I don't want to connect with people and then like be their friend and slit their throat. I want to have no feelings whatsoever. So she's been playing her game like that ever since. Meanwhile, Sam had the opposite. He's like, oh, yeah, I was doing fine, lying and manipulating. And then Sierra, my knees got cut out from underneath me. So I guess I had to be honest. Who knew that being honest in Survivor would be good?
Yeah. And it has been going well for him, right? Just being that like vulnerable, malleable person in the game who's pretty transparent, doesn't have these huge overreactions. Like he has done the most with the least since the merge.
Yes, 100%. And Kyle, meanwhile, says that he had a hard time in the beginning separating emotions from the game. And then he had to access a part of himself he long since turned off in the real world. And it kind of goes into his backstory of like growing up in the foster care system. So he does have the ability to lie and manipulate, but he just doesn't like that part, wants to make his kids proud. And I'm kind of like, do you think there's a connection there between like who you are in Survivor versus who you are in real life? I feel like these old school Survivor people are like, loyalty, like the Sues or the coaches, they're like loyalty above all. They make for bad Survivor players because at the end of the day, you do have to lie. And this is a game of deceit where you make connections, and these connections you make, you can't always take to the end with you if you're going to win. So does that make you a bad person to get rid of a connection in a game?
I feel like you and I would probably be slightly different players based on what you just said.
Tell me more.
So I think you and I are both honest, like straight shooters. I think I would probably work harder, and it could just be because of my job or my kids, to not outwardly lie and figure out creative ways to get around lying and being like, still play the game and not have this loyal to the soil Andy attitude. But I think I would do my darndest to try to kind of have the Kyle approach and like really play a game full of integrity, but not to the point where I would hamstring myself. So not a coach necessarily, but I think there's ways around it. Just like I don't curse very much in the real world, and the reason why is I'm like, man, there are tens of thousands of words at our disposal at any given time. Why do I need to say like 15 taboo words? Like, can I challenge myself to be better than those 15 words and express myself in a way that like I don't come off like a total doof, but also like people know where I'm at. I can still be emotive. Um, I think the same thing goes with lying and deceit. It's like you could frame things a certain way where you're not blatantly lying to someone's face or like being manipulative in a cruel way that still allows you to advance your game.
I agree, but here's my little caveat here. Like, lying in the game and then using and manipulating people, there's levels to everything, right? There's the games where you're like, you're just my chess piece and I'm gonna move you around the board as I want.
Mhm.
That makes you a bad person, I think. You are just a bad person and just shame on you, right?
Mhm.
Hey, old lady, you're trusting. Let me just drag you along to the end because you have no thoughts of your own. Yeah, it's effective if it works, if you can get that far, but the outlook and the intent is harmful. Meanwhile, I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, there is a level of lying that is just the baseline, right? Who's the vote tonight? You have to talk to everybody. It's not like you're going to ignore Saul right before you surprise him. And that's what it is. It's a surprise, right? And you're either with the votes or you're not with the votes. So when Saul comes to you and says, "Hey man, like heard my name's being thrown out," you're like, "No, it's me." Like there's a level of comfortability you have to have of like, "Hey Saul, don't worry, like it's gonna be Gabe, and then you go back and you write down Saul, right? I think that is part of the game that is just what it is. And I don't think that level of lie makes you a bad person in the real life. And I think you can still have integrity, not enjoy lying. I'm not a liar in the real world. I, in fact, make a point of telling the truth, even if it harms me, because it's usually easier to get through whatever. But Survivor, different lies. And I think the intent is kind of what makes you good or bad.
Right. I think that's fair. And I too am the same thing. I was like, I'm going to rat on myself before anybody else. Like if I screw up, I'm 100% owning it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to, and like if I do say something that is untrue unintentionally and I find out, like I'm like, oh, guys, hold up. I screwed this up. Here's how I lied. And I am so sorry. I think, if Saul comes to you, he's like, is the vote on me? You could say, I'm hearing that the vote's on you tonight, or I've heard you. I've also heard this, because at some point you've also heard another name, right? Like, so okay. you could always use the "I hear," or "Here's what I've been told," or "These are some of the things that are going on right now. These are the people having conversations." You could artfully dodge a lot without having to necessarily fan those flames. I do think that there is some lying that has to occur at some level. I'm just saying, if your game's predicated on lying and deceit, it's going to be a lot harder to win over a jury at the end. And even in this episode, Andy says something about like, it doesn't happen till the jury, but he's like, I've lied to each of these people sitting on the jury right now. It's like, you stupid robot. Why would you highlight that? Like,
yeah, they all kind of like, they all stank faced him.
Yeah. But like, to your point, there's levels to it. Like there's levels to lying, there's levels to manipulation, but then there's also like just lying to lie. And I don't think that helps anybody.
No. Speaking of Andy, his little interview was next where he's talking about a strictly AI computer brain. He's like, people are tricky because they have all this variance. Not all of them are an AI agent who are playing to optimize their win percentage. I'm just like, shut up. I hate you. Because then he goes into talking about a game board and arranging the pieces how he wants. And, he says, I'm in a crushing position. And while I hate to admit it, I do feel like he's made a better position for himself, whether by accident or by trying or by other people genuinely being like, this guy sucks so much, I want him. Whatever reason it is, he is seemingly in the middle at this point, and he's loving it. I just don't think he deserves to give himself as much credit as he's given himself.
You 100% right. I am totally in alignment with you. I think people have just dismissed him and allowed him to get in a more advantageous position because he's literally zero threat. He's licking balls on the beach. He's saying the wrong thing to everyone.
He's using an axe backwards.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm trying to cut it. It's like, turn it around.
Like, he has not made one
He
solid
ripped
play.
the bag on one of the challenges. Tried to pull the bag out of the sand, ripped the handle. He's like, Jeff. I'm like, no, man, I don't know what to tell you. You don't get a pass.
Like, and again, he's taken Rome's mojo. Like all that like good fortune that Rome was falling into is going Andy's way right now. And it's so hard to see somebody who's so bad at the game continue to find themselves in a position where they don't have to worry about being, on the chopping block. People are going to them for information because they know they could just pump him and get whatever they want, or they can manipulate him or get him to be a number for them.
Yes.
And he's floating in the most like generous way possible. I don't know how else to put it. Like he's floating, but he's floating above half of the other castaways. Like he is in the majority now.
Well, and ironically, I don't know if it's like this for every season. I don't feel like it is, just with my terrible memory, but it feels like there's a lot of actual real threats that you need to worry about before Andy, right? Like Genevieve, Sam, Rachel, Caroline, Kyle
doesn't lose challenges.
Like all 5 of those people are way more dangerous than Andy. So if it's me, it's like, yeah, Andy's gonna be around, like.
But to his credit, he's always on the right side of the vote.
He is.
Like, I cannot stand the guy. I think he's a terrible player, but he has always been on the right side of the vote, and that is a resume builder. And he's going to flip the Sierra thing. Is like, we were a tight 3, and I knew I had to get her out, so I got her out. I was the one behind getting Gabe out. He's gonna say all these things. Saul wouldn't have been out unless I was able to convince Lavo to flip on him and work with Genevieve on that vote.
Well, and it's, to your credit, it's all about, or to your point that we've talked about before, it's all about, can you sell this to the jury? He's going to say all these things, but can he say them convincingly enough? Or is the jury going to be like, nah, man, I know I was there. That was me pulling the strings. Like Gabe's there. Gabe's going to be like, no, bro, you can't take credit for this. Sam too, like whether he's on the jury or not, he'll be like, no, man, you did not do this or that. So.
Yeah, I do think they're going to call him out for that. I think this is part of Andy. He truly does feel like he is the one making these decisions, but he's not. It's just part of that, like the delusions that he has.
People have these plans, and then he has his own plan that aligns with their plan, so they just combine, and he thinks he ended up making the move.
Or they convince him to sway, and then he thinks, oh, they needed me, and because I swayed, I was the pivotal vote. But really, it's because he's easily manipulated.
Yes. So while Andy's bragging off in his own world, a boat comes up on shore. One person must get on it to go to a journey. Basically, if you can't decide who's going to go by volunteerism, you draw rocks, purple rock goes. Well, Sam and Genevieve raise their hand. They're feeling the heat. They want to go see what that's all about. Rachel then throws her name in the hat just because she doesn't want either of them to go. And who ends up winning? My girl Rachel. They pull stones and then she ends up going. And what awaits her is a puzzle. It's basically like a bunch of weights connected to a rope, and then it's all on the side of this dock. You throw the first weight over the edge, and then that starts kind of the rope timer, which would then pull over the next weight and the next weight and the next weight. Meanwhile, you have this board with colored balls in it, and it has like 5 columns. You have to match all of the colors on each row, make them all solid colors before all of the weights and the rope goes all the way into the ocean and pulls your table with it. Did I explain it pretty good?
Yeah, it's like a slide puzzle, right? So you can't actually remove the balls from the board, so you have to move them from one column to the next.
Exactly. So she flips over the weight. Her thing begins. She's like, like I'm stressed out. Like not fast enough, not fast enough. Meanwhile, she's like, I don't think I'm going fast enough. I was like yelling at the TV, "You're not, go faster!" And she literally like switch, and then like makes the puzzle, pulls the advantage out right as the table falls away with the weight dragging into the ocean.
That was pretty impressive. I think she kind of already had it figured out. Like she already knew her first couple moves before she dropped the weight. She's sharp. She's a smart player. And like once you get the rhythm down, like the first initial ones, it's going to go faster after that, right? Because once you have one column filled, then you're only dealing with 4 different colors. So you get the second column filled, you got 3. So yeah, I was impressed. I thought she did great.
Me too. She's the best. And what she finds once she opens up the advantage is she gets a block of votes. It's a secret. The person will know they had their vote blocked, but not by who. And you can use it only up until 6. So that's the last you can use it.
And they're at 8 now, currently, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you basically have 2 more tribals.
Mm-hmm.
So Rachel comes back. She makes an interesting point, which is like, it's really lose-lose. You go on these excursions because whatever you say, there's going to be people that don't believe you, right? And I found that true. It's like, no matter how many details, no matter how many, like excited hand gestures, people are going to be like, I don't trust you. Would you go on a boat ride? Would you try to take advantage of the excursion, or would you try to play it safe?
No, I'd go for sure. Like if I were Rachel, I'd go. If I were Genevieve, I'd go. If I were Sam, I'd go. If I were Sue, I'd go. Everybody else probably made sense staying back.
Yeah.
If I was Kyle, I'd go. I don't know why Kyle didn't jump up and say I'm going.
Yep. So she decides to be 99% honest. Basically, she tells what the challenge was, but says that she lost her vote.
Mm-hmm.
Sam doesn't believe her. He side-eyes her and kind of like, well, that's exactly what I would say. She does tell Sue and Caroline that, I got a vote and I got a block and vote advantage. Again, Sue's response to Rachel telling her like, oh, actually, I do have my vote and I have an advantage. She's like, oh, Gabe, my lover, my long lost son, Gabe told me about his beware advantage. And that's how I knew I could trust him forever. So I can trust you forever. Yeah. What's wrong with this lady?
I think it's weird that she has a son that's the same age as her. That's the trip.
16 years old.
It just shows that she doesn't have it. Like, it makes no sense. Like, if I am Caroline or Rachel or anybody who's seen this type of reaction from her, I go to her with anything I have because it's like, oop, got that vote in my pocket. Like, I would love to take her to the final tribal with me.
Yes, like that's what it is. Sue is the biggest goat out of all the goats. I've never seen a goat as goaty as throat goat. Mace in the face. Sue the poo.
I don't know what just happened.
Bars. All right. And then so Sue's easily manipulated. Then Rachel goes and tells Teeny and Andy. And Teeny's like, oh, yeah, this is a solid group of three. You know, basically they're talking about going final three together. And I just think it was masterfully played by my girl Rachel. She's like targeting all of the people she trusts, but in smaller groups, right? And kind of telling the people what they need to know and making each of them feel this is our final three.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I'm thinking is, why did you have to say you didn't have your vote to begin with? If you've already got the 5, like, how much do you think that really benefited her versus like compromised a future jury vote? Do you think it was 6-1, half dozen another?
I think personally that it draws in the people that you trust more, right? It kind of draws a very thick line in the sand of these are the people on this side that I trust, and these are the people I don't. They don't get to know all of it. But you, because you're special and I trust you, I will come to you later, have a one-on-one, and really have a chance to finish that bond, right? Finish off the, hey, here's a thing I didn't say earlier because Sam was here. You and I were good, though, and also let's talk strategy now.
Fair enough. Okay, that makes sense. I see that.
But also, speaking of strategy, Genevieve, I think this is smart on her part. This is kind of the only play she has left with as big of a target as she has on her back right now. She goes to Rachel and asks, would you be open to cutting like Andy or Sue, the people that are being shepherded to the end? And I thought that was so funny that she was like, yeah, why don't we just have all the strong people, right? Like, why bring these like goats along? And first thing Rachel does is she goes to Andy and is like, yeah, Sue's throwing your name out saying you're like a goat to be shepherded or something. And he's like, yeah, says my name, I gotta kill her.
This is laughable. I was in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh. So you know how earlier I said like Andy transformed to Gabe? That was the last episode.
Yeah.
This episode, Andy transformed to Sue because now
he's a chameleon like that.
All he's gonna think about is Genevieve.
Yeah.
Like, he's just got to spell her name right. That's all he's thinking. It's like, she's got to go. And ultimately, like, if I am Sam or Kyle, I am hitching my wagon to Andy and that vendetta he has, because there's no way he's going to continue to go about without bringing it up outside of his alliance of 5.
Oh, yeah.
And if you need to survive and you're on the outs, you need to find that potential crack. And we know that he's easily swayed and manipulated.
Yes. So then they go to the challenge. And this part was super funny to me where, Kyle has a sob story about how he grew up. I think Jeff was talking about like, yo, if you win another challenge, like, wow, impressive. And Kyle's like, yeah, I was always never first at anything. And then Sue starts crying, and Jeff's like, Sue, why the emotion? And she makes it about her. Kyle's sob story, she's like, I'm just so proud of myself.
Yeah. It's like, I will be damned if I let this guy upstage me. Who cares that you were in the foster care system?
He wrote my name down. Fuck your foster family.
And then Andy's like, wait a second. Is this how humans emote? I have to talk about my story.
Calculating. I don't understand. Does not compute.
Yeah, and so then he goes on his diatribe about how he's proud of himself and what his legacy is going to be. It's like, Shut up. And poor Sam's just sitting there trying to hold it in.
Oh, I know. The most patient man in the world. Yeah, Andy, as the elder statesman of strategy now, turns to Sue and is like, it's okay, Sue. We all have our hard moments. Remember when I had a hard moment? But now I've like grown so much. And it's like, no, bro.
You
Shut
know,
up.
Jeff, I recognize this beach. And Jeff's like, yeah, day 3. Like we're like 2 weeks removed. It's
Yeah, it's
not
not been that
impressive.
long. Oh, so essentially, this challenge, uh, there's a platform that you have a hold of the rope. You know, basically, you're pulling on this rope, pulling yourself forward, and then stacking blocks that say immunity. And at any point, if the platform that's only being held by your arm and a rope tilts, the blocks will tilt, fall over. You have to restart. And it was just a mess, man. It
Yeah.
was just left and right, people stacking them up as high as they can, but just one false move, the thing tilts over.
You know what I always wonder is, so obviously Probst is doing the narration of this, but it's not always on, like you're not seeing Jeff's lips move
Yeah.
as you're watching the contestants. And so as the castaways are backing, he's like, all right, Kyle's moving slow and steady. Let's see if anyone around him falls. And then like within a second, there's 2 people who fall. Or he's like, oh, all right, it looks like Rachel's close as long as she
Yeah.
doesn't, and then it falls. It's like,
Yeah.
do you think that those things are happening as close to as real time as the production shows it, or do you think that's just some TV magic and like he's saying those things, but they're just editing it to where it's like almost on the spot from the time he's making his announcements?
I think if he says it and then it happens, it's creative editing. But I also think there's a lot of that where it's like somebody's block falls and then he can just shout, Rachel's out, Rachel block falls, has to start over. You know, like I think that can be more real time. But I do think there is a lot of editing that goes into, um, you know, it's anyone's game right now. And like you place that strategically when you want the audience to feel that way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But
Um,
it was a real seesaw battle. I mean, there were like 4 or 5 different times I was like, oh, this is it. This is the end. And then, you know, on the 6th or 7th letter, something would tip.
yes. You know what's funny as well about the challenges? I've heard maybe via Survivor Reddit or somebody was talking about it, but apparently the challenges are super boring. Like obviously everyone's trying to win, but you know, when we view it at home, there's like this intense music, there's drums, there's like violins, like, oh my God, you're on the edge of your seat. But for them, you got to remember it's silent, like other than Jeff sometimes saying stuff. So you're just kind of like pulling on a rope, placing a block, retreating, getting a block, and like you can be out there for like hours, you know,
Mhm.
for some of these things.
Well,
So
I
it's
think
weird to picture it without the music and without the intense editing.
I have thought about that one with like the balancing or where it's just like mental endurance, right?
Yeah,
Like,
just on the posts, your
yeah, it's
feet.
like hour 3, like they're still standing, and there's like 5 people on the bench, like laid out sunburned.
Yeah. They're like, can I go back? Can I just starve in my own tent instead of out here? Yeah.
But for something like this, I would imagine it would be a little bit faster.
One strategy that I thought was really smart because, right, you have like what immunity 10 blocks. I'm not going to do the math, but you know, a good amount. I think there's even an exclamation mark. So you're like trying to balance, but you're also trying to go back and grab. And as you're like moving forward, I was thinking it'd be very smart. I think I saw Rachel do this, putting the block on the side of your chin as you're pulling the rope forward and then grabbing it and placing. I think that would be the strategy I would have just for like, how do you get this block from here to there without tipping? Feels like the most reasonable.
Yeah, I two strategies stood out to me. One was the under the chin, and then the other was in the pit.
Pit's a good one too.
I think I probably would have went pit.
Oh,
Just
okay.
kind of like anchored it in there. It keeps your arms straight. You're not flapping out.
Okay. Well, now I kind of want to do it. Now I'm like, how does my chin compare to your pit? Well, Rachel ended up pitting up a storm, or chinning up a storm, and won. And then everyone immediately kind of like wink, wink, nod, nod. It's Kyle, right? Everyone's just kind of like, finally, he lost. Let's get him. So Sue and Genevieve, basically, yeah, like Sue has wanted to kill Kyle forever. Teeny's saying she's not doing anyone that isn't Kyle. One thing I thought was stupid was they were like, family man is so dangerous to have in the end game. I don't believe that. I think they're missing a big opportunity right now to get Genevieve or someone else, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think they overplayed the family thing, and I think Kyle bought into it. He's like, "Oh, I am a family man. Yeah, I guess I am a big threat," and like he just leaned in even more. When I think that the plan should have been like, "Hey, there's one person who's been behind the last 4 votes.
Yes.
Are we really going to let this strategic threat skate on by because I happen to lose a challenge?" And the only person doing the calculus, as they put it, was Andy saying a quarter landing heads 5 times in a row isn't 50%, it's 6.2%. I haven't done the math, but Caroline
did.
I don't know where he got 6.2%. That's wrong. So I don't know.
Yeah. Andy's like, beep, boop. My calculations say 6.2% is the probability of this human advancing. And Caroline's like, the fuck it is. She's like, this guy's full of it. I don't know what he's talking about. Wild.
But Andy's reason for saying this wasn't so much to like say, no, we need to get Genevieve because she's a better threat. It was because Genevieve mentioned his name.
Of course. Of course. The Terminator will not be stopped. But before we kind of move on to Tribal, I do want to kind of touch on this because we talked about it before where it's like, yeah, Challenge Beast, sure. But like, does anyone in the jury in 2024, new Survivor, really respect, all right, you got here because you won a few challenges? Like, what else did you do? You were on the wrong side of votes a lot of time. Like, what else did you do to drive the game? Nothing,
Yeah.
And the family man story, no one's going to give $1 million to somebody because they have kids. It isn't what it is.
No, but I keep hoping so every day, Bird. Just
one day.
I tell strangers, I've got 3 of these things.
Got 3 of them.
And I
They're
just
expensive.
slowly extend my hands.
And meanwhile, strangers like me are like, you did this. You did this to yourself. I didn't do this.
Now we look like a scarecrow. Damn it.
Yeah, now you're relatable. Damn it. Now I have to give you money.
And by the way,
yes,
Google AI just did the math. It's 3.125% chance. So even half of what
Andy
said. So, I mean, if you're gonna go in, use the best numbers you can. No such thing as halfway crooks, Andy.
That's true. It's good. It's a good lesson to learn. But I do agree. It's like, will we never have another chance to get Kyle out? I don't think that that's the case. I think you'll have other opportunities, and there's just frankly more better people to target. So Rachel's eyeing Genevieve, but like there's a lot of factors that go into this. It's basically Kyle versus Genevieve. Who is the bigger threat? Who do people think is? I fast forward to the jury. Gabe on the jury looked like the biggest cholo, and I was like, "What?"
I thought the same thing. I was like, "Where'd the
Notice that?
Mexican dude come from?"
Yeah, I was like, "What?" He showed a little flash of it when he's like, "Can I hit something for my people back home?" And he did his stupid little dance.
Uh-huh.
But the whole time he's talking like a nerd, about Sue and his chess pieces. So it was interesting to see him like, oh, this is how you choose to go about life? Not what I pictured.
No, not at all. I didn't recognize him, honestly. It took me a while to be like, oh, that's gotta be Gabe. That's the only person it could be. Like his hair wasn't out and down, it was like tightly pulled back. Like it's just mind-boggling.
Mind boggling. Shout out Crimson. Thanks for stopping by, playa. Yeah, tonight we're talking about Survivor 47 and the final tribal. Kyle mentions that everyone wants to vote him out because of his challenge prowess. Sue rolls her eyes as far as she can into the back of her head, but it's true. It's not. Everyone doesn't want to vote out Kyle because he wrote your name down. So yeah, he's got a point.
And he's probably the most universally liked person on the island right now. Like suicide. Everybody else genuinely seems like they get along with him. They respect him. There's I don't know, some mutual adoration for his gameplay and just who he is as a person, except for Sue.
By the way, this is kind of a brilliant Starbucks name to give. Sue aside, right?
Yeah.
That's good. That is good.
We roamed ourselves right into that one, didn't we?
Oh, I'm jazzed up about this. I got to figure out a way to use this somehow.
All right.
I mean, it's all the rage, right? Isn't that what all the kids like talking about?
No, can't say that.
So, yeah, basically, Kyle is making his pitch. Like, guys, come on! Like, I do challenges, so who cares? Like, why don't we give the people at home what they want? Why don't we have a crowd pleasing moment? Is how he put it. Kind of like there's bigger threats than me out here, and meanwhile, other people are like, oh, well, Sue isn't going to hear it. She even said, Sue was like, yeah, I can't be swayed. I'm ready to vote. Like,
yeah,
there's nobody convincing her not to put Kyle's name down.
And Probst tried to drop him a fair one. He's like, oh yeah, there's been people who have won 5 times, and half those people haven't won Survivor in the end, even though they've won 5 immunity challenges. Some of them haven't even made it to the final tribal. So Probst is kind of like, don't just do this, guys. This is going to be the most boring TV ever.
Oh, boring. Like, have a little faith in yourselves. This is also the tribal where Andy says, I lied to all the jurors to their faces. And Sierra shot daggers to that man. She was like, I'm going to,
But you know what? Andy's just happy a girl that attractive looked at him.
That's true. He's like, new Andy is getting attention. Old Andy would have peed his pants, but new Andy is loving it. So, yeah, I mean, Kyle gets voted out. Thanks, Sue. Yeah. Carolyn knew that she couldn't go against Sue again. Like, that would have screwed her game up. I think Rachel is trying to be good with Sue or with Caroline, and that kind of goes with Sue. Yeah, the numbers weren't there. There's no saving them.
Rachel did agree with Andy in his poor math earlier, though. I think Rachel understands the assignment. Genevieve has to go. She did not have Carolyn because Carolyn would not have had Sue. And so for those reasons, now that they have this underdogs alliance of 5, she had to just play it cool this week, knowing that next week if Genevieve doesn't win, she's got to be the target.
Gotta be. Yeah. And
I
so,
don't know. I feel like something's going to get squirrely. It seems too easy that it's just going to be Genevieve and done.
I mean, nothing is for certain. And as they say, if you survive one day, you got a chance to make up for the next. Anything can happen.
Did you see Carolyn pandering to Genevieve, though?
No, what'd she say?
She's like, so before the vote, she looks at Genevieve and she's like, you know, one of my favorite Survivor players of all time once said, sometimes you need to see through the noise to find the
Yes.
news. And
Yes.
Jeff's like, who said that? And she's like, Genevieve.
Yes.
Like,
thank you for bringing that up.
Like,
wild.
Did we just become best friends? Like, that was such a weird moment to me where it's like, okay, clearly you're already playing the end game. You're trying to get that vote.
Yeah.
Like that jury vote if you make it to the final three.
That was some hard glucking for sure. Oh, you have the best words. Just such good words. Yeah.
It was just such a weird moment. I was like, Caroline, why are you doing this? You don't need to do it.
Icky.
Yeah.
So Kyle's voted out. He says, line them up, knock them down. And everyone gets in a line and he hugs them all, says some inspirational shit about his family and giving $1.20. And for what it's worth, that's not how percentages work. It's not. If you give 100%, there is no more to give.
I love Kyle.
Idiot.
I liked him. I hope he comes back on like an All Stars or something like that down the line.
Man, at that point, Jeff Probst is gonna be like wheelchair bound. By the time they have an All-Star for these casts.
He just seems like a good dude, man. I like some of the stuff was a little bit corny, but I think his heart's in the right place. Yeah, like he's somebody who I would have loved to see win.
Yeah, no, there was like kind of a boyish innocence to him, I think, and kind of like a down home, like, yeah, aw shucks, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There was an aw shucks goodness to him, a cornbread trust.
Wow, yeah, it's like watching a Technicolor episode of the Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah, yeah, he's got a talking horse with a hay seed in front of his teeth, just telling us about how life used to be, making us feel comfortable.
Yeah. Okay, so we got Kyle who hits the dusty trail.
Yep.
Did you look at any of the sneak previews for next week?
No, man, my freaking recording cuts out before. I mean, maybe there was like 2 seconds of it. What happens in the previews?
I watched it, but I don't remember. So, prediction.
All right, prediction. Well, I was completely wrong with my prediction from last week. Prediction this week, I mean, it's got to be Genevieve. I think she has to get immunity or she's out. Like, there's no way around that. Who else would be a threat? I think people could catch on to Rachel. She's like building up a lot of steam. But I don't think she's done enough yet as a resume to really be like out there like that. Sam's really the only physical person left. I still think it just has to be Genevieve. So, like, is there any way around? Is there anyone else it could be?
Yes. I think that my girl Caroline is reading that Caroline understands that if she now lets either Genevieve move without making a move on Genevieve or Rachel run the game since Rachel formed the alliance, that Caroline's going to have to do something drastic. And I think she is going to have her herd of misfits with Sue and Andy, and that 3 is going to pull someone in and she's going to try to make a big move. Because if she doesn't do it now, it's going to be too late for her. She's done nothing so far.
Caroline? Yeah. And she is smart enough to kind of realize she'll have to do something, because if she would have waited to get Gabe, then she could have like had more of a look at all the things I did. But now it's kind of like, oh, you two who just voted together and you were around at the end.
Yeah, you're in a vote with everybody except for your number one and the person who left. Like that doesn't look like a move for you. So I think I don't think this Kumbaya five underdogs is gonna sit for too long. I don't think any of them are looking around saying, I want to go with these five. I think everybody's saying, I could go with Andy and Sue, no problem. But eventually, Teeny, Rachel, and Caroline are going to have to eliminate one of the other ones.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the funny thing too. And I think that was Genevieve's point, is like, look, everyone wants to sit with Andy and Sue, but do you really think, like, what odds does that give you to be the one sitting with Andy and Sue? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, everyone wants that final three. So what are the odds you get there?
And I think that's Genevieve's point she made this episode, right?
Yeah.
Is if we're all thinking that we're going to bring two goats along, that means that we're going to have to cannibalize ourselves. Why not just take out these nerds now and like have a fair fight at the end? And so it's going to be interesting because I don't think Sue would get any votes, regardless of what happens from this point on.
No.
I don't think Andy's going to be able to keep it together enough. Like if it came to making fire, he'd light himself on fire. Like,
yeah. No, there goes his hair. Like, it's gone for sure.
And like as much as I think Caroline's a really sharp player, she doesn't have a resume now either. But I think she's smart enough to realize that like time to take action is now.
That's a really excuse me. That's a really smart observation, because, like, if you think about it this way, out of the remaining players in the game, who has the relationship with Sue and Andy? Right? It's Caroline, I think. At
Mhm.
least Sue and Caroline, that's a tight two. And then Andy, I think he wants to work with them, because he probably also, as dumb as he is, programmed into his algorithm that Sue is who I want to sit next to. So if that's the case, then you got to go with the Sue Caroline. That means everyone else needs to get those people out.
And, you know, Andy already reached across the aisle, so to speak, and connected with Sue this last episode. And they have a mutual interest in removing Genevieve. And Genevieve's interest is getting rid of Rachel because she knows that Rachel is the only person who could actively campaign against her. And we just saw Caroline pander to Genevieve. So I could see a scenario where Caroline pits herself in the middle to make a decision where she puts Rachel and Genevieve at odds against each other, knowing Andy's going to vote Genevieve, Rachel's going to vote Genevieve, and then her and Sue and Andy will ultimately determine if it's going to be Rachel going home or Genevieve, because Genevieve is going to go Rachel and Sam's probably going to go Rachel.
You know, it's kind of sad, and I say this with all love for my boy Sam, is like, he might be a good one to take to the end too, because like all the votes have gone against him, and he's like eloquent, he's charming, people like him, but what has he really done? Right? I want him to go to the end, but he hasn't done anything. So I know he would play the like, look, I started from the bottom, I had the hardest road to get here. You can say that, but also you're going to have to prove something to me, right? And I don't know that he has anything so far that he can prove, like, yo, look at this shit that I did.
No, he's going to have to somehow, like, just as I was saying, Caroline's got to put herself in a position to be a swing vote. Sam has to do the same thing, right? Like, he needs to create a conflict where he's in the middle and he's the swing vote, because that's how you reestablish power. is you force people to come to you for conversation. And right now he's been on the out of every conversation and every vote. And yeah, there is some credit to surviving and advancing, but that only lasts so long. And when you're looking at the top three players who have played, everybody's going to look for the big move. Everybody's going to see who hit the biggest home run. And right now, he doesn't have any home runs. In fact, the person who he was just bringing along as like his useful idiot has flipped the script and now holds power over him.
Yeah, totally. So that's, yeah, I need my boy Sam to do better, as Dice would say. Do better. So we'll see. Yeah, there's a lot of avenues to the end, only a couple which will have you winning them, right?
I think it's going to be Genevieve or Rachel going home next week.
I mean, I think it's got to be. I would almost say it has to be Genevieve, but also they always have some other name. There's always somebody that says, well, what if we did this? Even just for the editing purposes, it's almost like they have to throw out another name just, to kind of keep us guessing. But I don't see how you don't get Genevieve out.
If Genevieve wins immunity, what happens?
Genevieve wins immunity. Sue and Caroline are together. I think Andy would band with them. I think they would target Sam, ironically enough. I think that those people don't have enough of a target for Rachel. And Sam being a physical threat, Andy having a little bit of like that small dick syndrome of like, this is the cool kid that bullied me. I think they could land on him as an easy, like, he's just kind of floating around. Let's like chop him out while we wait for Genevieve.
I agree. Logically, it's going to be Genevieve. If she wins, it's Sam. I'm always rooting for chaos, and I feel like at this point in the game, people have to create chaos. So that's why I'm saying either Genevieve or Rachel. But I mean, the smart decision is Genevieve and then fall back on Sam.
Yeah. All right. Well, can't wait to see what happens next time. But in the meantime, that has been Survivor Season 47, Episode 11. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Peace.